In the quiet hours, when the world softens and the edges of thought begin to blur, welcome, dear traveler, to Twilight Tale. Here, we wander gently through the half-lit corridors of forgotten histories, moving not with urgency, but with breath, with wonder, with the drifting slowness of moonlight sliding across old stone. This is a place where stories are not spoken loudly. They drift, they echo, they settle softly like dust upon untouched ruins. And each night we choose a new forgotten corner of the world and listen closely, not for answers, but for the quiet mysteries that linger beneath them. So, before we begin, let your shoulders fall. Feel the weight leave your hands. Let the rhythm of your breath become a lantern in the dark, guiding you gently through what comes next. And now, allow the night to open its first doorway. For our steps this evening lead us toward a land where silence has its own ancient heartbeat, a landscape shaped by rolling Macedonian hills, soft and shadowed, as if guarding secrets beneath their sleeping folds. Some say that behind these quiet slopes lies a kingdom hidden from time, a place where stone remembers more than human tongues ever could. Others speak of gates that reveal themselves only under moonlight, leading not outward, but inward, toward the still, sacred places within us. Whether these tales are truth or gentle imagination no longer matters. What matters is that you are here, listening, breathing, ready to drift into the soft shadows of Macedonia's silent hills and toward the hidden kingdom that waits beyond their calm silhouettes. So let us begin, slowly, softly, like a candle being lit in an ancient room. A soft dusk settles over Macedonia's rolling slopes, the kind of dusk that drifts like a slow exhale from the earth. The light fades gently, as though the sky itself wishes not to disturb the hush rising from the hills. There is an old shepherd's path here, thin, wavering, barely more than a memory pressed into the grass. It bends toward a stone half buried in lichen, a stone so weathered it seems to have grown from the soil rather than been shaped by hands. Yet it is said that this stone is no mere accident of nature. Whispers tell us that it marks the outer edge of a forgotten gate, a threshold once leading into the cradle of an ancient kingdom whose name faded like morning breath on glass. If you stand very still, letting the evening deepen around you, you might feel a soft stirring beneath the ground, not a tremor, not a pulse, but something quieter, like an echo still returning home after centuries of wandering. Some believe it is the gate remembering itself. Others say it is simply the earth settling into night. But the truth, as always in these hills, lives somewhere in the gentle space between. The winds that glide over this landscape carry no urgency. They brush the grass with a patient hand. They move as though searching for something once familiar, perhaps the murmur of travelers who followed this path long ago, or the steps of kings who walked here in silence, seeking the sanctuary hidden beneath these slopes. For the hills feel hollow in places, as if chambers and corridors once pulsed under their skin. And when dusk thickens, the air grows heavy with the sensation of presence, the soft feeling that someone, or something, is still listening. Beneath the silence, a story begins to uncoil. It is said that before the rise of great cities, before armies stamped their warnings into the soil, before kings carved their names into stone, there was a lineage of rulers who preferred quiet over conquest. They shaped no golden thrones. They sought no triumphal gates. Their kingdom was woven more from reverence than from rule. Their refuge, if the old tales hold true, lies beneath these very hills, wrapped in layers of soil and shadow. Some call it the chamber of the first kings. Others call it the chamber of the moon, for moon symbols mark the lichen-covered stones scattered across the slopes like broken constellations. The shepherds of old whispered that the carvings were signs that the hills themselves were sanctuaries, that the tribes who once lived here believed the moon was the great guide of souls, not a distant star, but a gentle lantern leading the departed to rest. In the soft light of dusk, these symbols begin to appear, not all at once, not in any way that startles. Rather, they introduce themselves the way old friends do, slowly, with quiet recognition. A curl in the stone, a faint spiral, a mark resembling a crescent's delicate curve. Each one feels like a breath from a world we can barely recall. As we walk the shepherd's path, the air grows cooler. The hills close in softly, the slopes gathering around us like guardians of a memory they refuse to surrender. The ground dips gently, and the path widens as though encouraging us onward. Here, at the threshold of twilight, myth and soil intertwine. Some believe that beneath these slopes lies a subterranean hall carved by hands long lost to time, a hall lit not by flame, but by a pale, otherworldly glow, perhaps reflections from moonstone left to capture the night. Others imagine a network of chambers, each one holding a relic of a king whose reign was shaped by contemplation rather than command. Scrolls of brittle reed, bowls carved from riverstone, spears dulled not from battle, but from ceremonial rites invoking protection rather than bloodshed. The truth remains veiled, but imagination, when invited gently, unfolds like a slow blossom. We drift deeper along the path, where the scent of evening grass thickens into earth and moss. The landscape becomes a corridor of soft shadows, each one shifting with the breath of the wind. The sky above dims into a muted cobalt, the first stars trembling into wakefulness. Somewhere ahead, a faint shimmer seems to pull us onward. When we reach the lichen-covered stone at last, it feels less like an object and more like a boundary, a marker between the world we know and the world we can only sense. The stone tilts slightly, as though weighed down by the burden of memory. Its surface glows faintly, not with light, but with age, with the presence of centuries resting upon it. If one kneels close, one might see the impression of lines that once formed a larger pattern, perhaps a map, perhaps a ritual diagram, perhaps the outline of a gate that has long since sunk into the earth. In soft moonlight, these faint engravings seem to tremble, as if yearning to be understood. Beyond the stone, the hillside slopes downward into a hollow where shadows gather like ancient dust. A cluster of rocks forms an arch, broken, uneven, but unmistakably shaped by intention. This is where the whispers claim the gate once stood, a portal of stone and silence, a sentinel between realms. As twilight deepens, we can almost imagine what this place once was. A gathering ground for tribes who honored the moon, a point of descent for kings who sought the wisdom of the earth, a holy threshold for those who believed that true power is found not in proclamation, but in quiet understanding. The myths tell us that inside the subterranean sanctuary, the walls were etched with stars, constellations mapped not to guide sailors, brushed not to guide sailors, but to souls. Torches burned with oils infused with herbs meant to ease the mind into deeper vision. The early kings, it is said, descended into these chambers not to hide from the world, but to hear it more clearly. Their rhythms, their tremors, their quiet warnings carried through the soil. If you listen now as night begins to gather, you might hear something faint,
Not a voice, not a sound, but an impression, like a memory brushing against the present, like the after-echo of a footstep taken by someone who walked this very slope long ago. The hills seem aware of us. A soft breeze stirs, carrying the scent of distant pine. The shadows shift, but without urgency. Everything moves with the vast patience of time. We imagine entering the long-lost chamber, the air cool and still, the torch glow dancing against carved stone, the echoes of old prayers lingering like dust motes in the half-light. We imagine the kings sitting in circle, not above their people, but among them, speaking softly, letting silence fill the spaces between words. For silence in this forgotten kingdom was not absence, it was presence, it was reverence. And as we stand before the fragmented gate, we feel that same presence now. The earth beneath our feet seems to breathe, a slow, ancient breath. The hillside seems to lean in, as though offering something undefinable, not knowledge, not clarity, but an invitation to wonder. Some truths are not meant to be discovered in full. Some histories choose their own guardians, and some sanctuaries, sealed beneath layers of soil and time, remain closed not out of secrecy, but out of sacred necessity. As night settles completely, the lichen on the stone emits a faint silver sheen. The air cools into stillness. The path behind us becomes a ribbon of shadow, disappearing into the soft, moonlit dark. We let the silence grow. We let the landscape rest around us like a gently folded cloak. And in this quiet, we understand something the early kings may have understood as well, that not all gates open outward, some open inward, into the deep chambers of memory, into the soft corridors of understanding, into the places beneath our own quiet hills, where forgotten truths rest like cool stone beneath the soil. Perhaps the sanctuary beneath these slopes was never meant to be found in the way we imagine, never meant to be excavated or exposed to daylight. Perhaps it exists now as it always did, half in the earth, half in the mind, fully alive only when the night is calm and the listener is ready. And so we stand before the sealed stone, not with expectation, but with reverence. A gentle pause settles upon us, as though the world itself is exhaling. Some gates, after all, do not open by force or discovery. Some open only in silence. Some open only in dreams. Some only in the slow, moonlit hours when we allow ourselves to listen, truly listen, to the quiet places within. And as the hills fade into night, we walk away softly, carrying with us the tender uncertainty that perhaps the sanctuary beneath the quiet hills still breathes, still watches, still waits, not to be revealed, but simply to be remembered. It begins, as many old stories do, with a single breath of light. A spark, no larger than a firefly's wing, no brighter than the first star trembling awake in the evening sky, drifts from a dying hearth. It hovers for a moment in the quiet air, a fading jewel suspended between warmth and darkness. Some say this was the final ember of a sacred flame, a flame tended long ago by priestesses who lived among Macedonia's secluded hills. Others say it was merely a coal carried by accident on the hem of a traveler's cloak. But in forgotten corners of the land, where memory fades and silence grows deep roots, it is said that this ember was the last breath of an ancient oracle, a fire that once spoke in murmurs and visions, offering guidance to wanderers, dreamers, and kings. Not guidance in words, but in sensations, a warmth on the skin, a shimmer in the mind, a subtle tilt in the direction of one's thoughts. A language without voice, yet full of meaning. Whispers tell us that those who sought the oracle never found a temple, nor a priest waiting behind an altar of stone. They found instead a flame, small, veiled, almost shy, kept alive in secluded hearths, carried from valley to valley by a lineage of women whose names were allowed to drift into anonymity, as if the mystery required their fading. And so the tale opens with an ember, a final glow, a breath of warmth lingering in the cold. It is from this fragile beginning that the journey unfolds. Some believe the oracle's flame was born in a time older than kingdoms, older than carved stone, older even than spoken songs. They say that in the earliest ages, when the world was still heavy with silence, the fire was lit from a celestial spark, perhaps lightning, perhaps starlight, perhaps something more ancient still. Its guardians tended it in hidden hollows, offering herbs and prayers, coaxing from it not smoke, but visions. Those who approached the flame did not seek prophecy in the way later ages would demand it. They did not ask for victories or inheritances. They came instead with questions shaped like sighs. Where should I go? Who am I becoming? What path leads me into peace? And the flame answered with its warmth, softening when a path grew dangerous, brightening when the heart moved toward truth. Whether these stories are memories or metaphors, no one can say. Yet as we walk through the hills now, in this quiet twilight centuries later, the air feels thick with echoes. It is as though the land itself has gathered every question ever whispered to the flame, storing them beneath its stones the way the sea keeps shells along its shores. The path before us winds gently upward into a moonlit ravine. Moss cushions each footstep. Ferns rise in soft, feathery plumes. The air is cool, but not cold, like the breath of someone sleeping peacefully nearby. And though no fire burns here now, something lingers in the atmosphere, a faint residue of warmth, or memory, or longing. We follow the imagined trail of those who once sought the oracle. Some were shepherds, stepping quietly with lanterns shielded from the wind. Some were travelers whose names appear in no surviving text, merchants, wanderers, lost lovers. A few, perhaps, were kings dressed in humble cloaks, seeking counsel away from the watchful eyes of courts and councils. All of them climbed through ravines such as this, where the moon laid silver pathways over stones, and the night listened gently without judgment. It is said the flame never called to anyone, it only waited. And those who found it did so not by map, but by intuition, a subtle pull, like the way one recognizes the direction of home even when the landscape looks unfamiliar. As the ravine narrows, the shadows deepen. They gather like soft velvet folds, moving but not threatening. The world has slowed to a hush. We step over roots, over clusters of blue-green moss glowing faintly in the moonlight. The wind carries the scent of sage, wild mint, and the faint mineral breath of stone. Somewhere deep within these slopes, the oracle's embers were once kept in chambers of earth, small hollows warmed by firelight, smoothed by the kneeling of many generations. The flames were fed with aromatic woods, with sprigs of mountain herbs, with fragments from sacred scrolls that had served their time. Fire does not consume such offerings, it releases them. And so visions drifted upward, not as commands, but as suggestions, like a whisper heard through a dream. In this world of quiet communion, divination was never spectacle. The flame did not leap into monstrous shapes. It did not roar with dramatic portents. It flickered gently, thoughtfully, as if considering the question laid before it. Those who came seeking answers often found the flame reflecting back the truth they already carried, hidden beneath fear or doubt. Imagine kneeling in that chamber, the earth cool under your knees, the walls holding a soft resonance, as though shaped from memory rather than stone. The fire glows low, a wavering breath of orange and gold. Your question hovers in the air, unspoken yet understood. The flame brightens. just slightly, then dims, then brightens again, and in its quiet conversation, something inside you loosens, something lifts, something rearranges itself with the gentleness of leaves shifting in a forest breeze. This was the oracle, not a voice booming from the heavens, but a warmth rising from the earth. A reminder that often guidance arrives not as a revelation, but as recognition. Yet history, with its tendency to categorize and reduce, would later attempt to name this tradition. Some scholars called it a flame cult, others dismissed it as a folk superstition. A few recorded it as a temple rite, though no temple has been found. And still others insisted it was no more than fireside myth, embellished through the centuries by shepherds and wanderers who wove magic into their stories to comfort long nights. But the contradictions melt into a tranquil ambiguity when we stand here beneath the moon, where the ravine widens into a gentle clearing. This is one of the places where the flame is said to have burned last. A shallow hollow in the earth, framed by stones soft with moss. A basin of darkened clay, cracked by time. Scorched marks on rock, almost invisible now. A quiet bowl-shaped depression, as though the ground once cupped a small, flickering heart of light. No ember remains. The fire has been gone for generations. And yet, something lingers. A stillness that feels intentional. A hush that feels inhabited. A breath of warmth that does not come from the air, but from memory. We kneel before the empty hollow, not out of ceremony, but out of instinct. The night deepens around us, the stars brightening overhead like scattered embers drifting upward. The earth cools beneath our hands. Somewhere in the dark, a bird murmurs drowsily. A leaf falls without urgency. In this moment, the boundary between legend and reality softens. Perhaps the flame was real, a sacred relic, a lineage of priestesses tending it with reverence. Perhaps it was only story, a metaphor shaped by those who needed guidance in a world that often gave none. Perhaps the flame never existed at all, at least not in the way we imagine. Or, and this feels truer in the quiet of night, its light still flickers, but not in a hearth or a hollow. Perhaps the oracle's last ember has shifted homes. Perhaps it glows now in the minds of those who seek clarity, faint but steady, brightening whenever we move toward what feels right, dimming when we wander into shadows. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. Some flames burn only in the chambers of the heart. We sit with this uncertainty, this soft, sacred ambiguity, letting it drift through us like smoke rising from a forgotten fire. There is no conclusion here, no revelation, only a tender sense that something ancient passed through this place, something gentle and unassuming, something that offered guidance without demanding belief. The night folds around us like a cloak. The clearing grows darker, then softer, then calm. In the quiet, the hollow in the earth feels almost warm. We rise slowly, leaving the place as we found it, untouched, unclaimed, resting in its own silence. And as we walk away, the wind stirs faintly, a breath, a whisper, as though some old ember remembers us, as though the oracle, wherever it dwells now, has offered a final, delicate glow before returning to sleep.
It begins beneath the hush of an eternal night, in a chamber sealed by centuries, where dust floats like drifting constellations. A crown of delicate gold petals rests upon a stone shelf. It gleams faintly, as if still remembering the shape of the head it once adorned. Even in darkness, the wreath gathers the starlight slipping through the thin crack overhead, holding it like a quiet breath. Its shadows tremble, almost like the wings of a sleeping bird.
It is said that when the tombs of Vergina were first uncovered, long buried beneath layers of earth, time, and forgetting, those who stepped inside felt as though they were intruding upon a dream paused mid-sentence. The air held a stillness too heavy, too reverent to belong to any ordinary room. It felt like the hush of an ancient prayer. And at the center of that hush, this crown waited. Gold leaves, gold blossoms, gold veins so thin they looked as though they had been hammered from sunlight itself. The wreath seemed less like an object of royalty and more like a fragile constellation fallen into human hands. Some believe it belonged to a king whose deeds echo faintly through the corridors of history. Others whisper that it was crafted for a moonlit ritual, a ceremonial bloom set upon the brow of someone who was not a ruler, but a keeper of sacred rites. And still others murmur that the crown was never meant to be worn at all, that it was an offering to the night, a tribute to the celestial rhythms woven through early Macedonian belief, a way of honoring the sky that watched over warriors, shepherds, mothers, and kings alike. Yet beneath the silence of this chamber, such distinctions melt like mist. For what lies before us is not merely a relic of power, but a symbol of beauty crafted with tender hands, each petal shaped as though the artisan wished to hold a piece of eternity. We step softly deeper into the tomb, letting our imagination move with the slow, candlelit rhythm of ancient ritual. The chamber's air is cool, carrying the faint mineral scent of stone. The walls, smoothed by human intention, curve with the subtle geometry of early Macedonian design, neither grand nor crude, but reverent, like the inside of a vessel meant to hold memory. Our footsteps fall lightly, muffled by centuries of dust. Here, beneath the hills of Vergina, the boundary between archaeology and legend becomes thin, translucent, like a veil lifted only for those who walk with quiet hearts. Every fragment, every carving, every misplaced grain of sand feels like the echo of a life once lived in full color. The crown rests atop a stone table, carved with deliberate simplicity. No ornament competes with the softness of its glow. The wreath seems alive, almost breathing, as though each leaf holds the warmth of a forgotten hand. Its petals curve gently outward, capturing the shape of laurel leaves, symbols of victory, of divine favor, of triumph earned or bestowed. Yet these leaves feel different. They feel softer, more contemplative, made not for the noise of celebration, but for the quiet of night ceremonies. Their edges catch the light with fragile determination, the way thin ice holds dawn's first glimmer. If one looks closely, faint impressions remain on the gold, marks like fingerprints, smoothed by time yet still discernible, traces of the artisan who shaped them, or perhaps the wearer whose touch lingered upon them last. These small indentations feel sacred, as though they hold the breath of someone who lived centuries ago, someone who dreamed under a different sky, and yet felt the same longing for beauty, for meaning, for remembrance. In many ways, the crown is less a royal object and more a message, a whisper carried across time. We pause, allowing the silence to deepen. Stories rise around us like gentle spirits. It is said that when this crown was first placed within the tomb, mourners stood in a circle around the chamber, holding oil lamps that flickered against their tear-wet faces. Some were kin, some were loyal companions, some were simply those who felt the gravity of loss, drawn to witness the passage of a soul into memory. They stood motionless as the crown was laid to rest, a symbol of honor not for what the deceased had conquered, but for how they had lived, or perhaps for how they were hoped to be remembered. Their grief over centuries has evaporated into the stone, becoming a quiet fog lingering in the air. When we imagine them now, their tears feel warm, their breaths softening the chamber, their hands trembling under the small flame of their lamps. And if we listen with the stillness of someone falling into dream, we may hear their farewells echo from the corners of the tomb, not in words, but in the way silence thickens when many hearts beat with the same ache. Whispers tell us that gold was chosen for its incorruptibility. Unlike flesh, it does not decay. Unlike stone, it does not weather. Unlike memory, it does not fade, unless one wills it to. Gold holds its glow even in darkness, even in burial, even in centuries of sleeping beneath the hills. Perhaps that is why the crown seems so strangely alive, because it has not surrendered its essence, because it carries a memory more stubborn than names carved in marble. Perhaps, too, it was made to mirror the moon itself. For the early Macedonians believed deeply in the sky's guidance, in celestial rhythms shaping fate. The wreath's petals shimmer under the faintest light, reflecting soft luminescence, the way moonlit leaves glow on a quiet night. Some say the crown was worn during rituals honoring Selene, the moon goddess, the luminous guardian watching the world while it sleeps. Others insist it crowned a king whose soul, upon death, was guided into the night sky to join the constellations of ancestors. Both stories feel true in different ways. For the crown carries within it a celestial tenderness, a softness that does not speak of conquest or grandeur, but of belonging to something larger, quieter, and eternally luminous. As we wander deeper into the tomb's hush, every detail becomes a doorway into reverie. A faint spiral carved on the wall, a symbol of time, of cycles, of eternal return. A fallen shard of painted pottery, its colors muted, its purpose forgotten, yet its presence a reminder of human hands. A thin layer of settled dust, shining in moonbeams like oceanic mist. A single stone out of alignment, perhaps shifted by the footstep of a mourner long ago. All these fragments, fragile and unassuming, weave together into a story that does not need to be complete to be meaningful. History offers its facts like stones, but legend fills the spaces between them with breath. And so we drift in this blend of truth and myth, letting our thoughts move with the slow rhythm of torchlight reflecting against gold. If we imagine, we can see the moment the crown was crafted. A quiet workshop lit by early morning sun, tools laid out neatly. Sheets of gold beaten by careful hands until they resembled leaves thin enough to quiver in the slightest breeze. The artisan, a figure without name, without recorded life, bending close to carve each delicate vein. Perhaps they shaped it for a king. Perhaps they shaped it for a beloved. Perhaps they shaped it for ceremony, never knowing whose brow it would grace. But as the wreath took form, they must have felt something, a sense of weight not measured in gold's heaviness, but in its significance. For the crown, even in its making, seems infused with devotion. Such devotion survives the years. Now, as we return to the crown resting in its chamber, we see that it glows not with brilliance, but with patience. Gold does not dim, it waits. It has waited for centuries in this sleeping tomb, surrounded by silence thick enough to feel like a presence. It has watched dust settle in soft spirals. It has heard no footsteps, no words, no human breath, until, perhaps, the moment someone rediscovered it. Even then, its glow did not change. Perhaps it remembers nothing, or perhaps it remembers everything. The light of lamps, the tears of mourners, the whispered prayers, the faint scent of incense rising into the air, the soft murmur of a final goodbye, the closing of the tomb, the silence that followed. When we kneel before it now, letting the slow breath of night surround us, the crown seems to shift.
It begins with a question carried on a drifting breeze, soft, uncertain, ancient. How do cities dream when their people fall silent? The night does not answer with words. It answers with a hush that settles like pale dust across abandoned streets. And far in the quiet valley of what was once Heraclea Linxistis, a faint moonbeam touches marble, smooth, cold, patient, revealing a city not awake, not asleep, but suspended in a dream as delicate as frost on glass. It is said that cities breathe long after their final voices fade. Some breathe loudly, through ruins that cry for remembrance. Others breathe gently, their memories wrapped in starlight, held beneath the silence of time. Heraclea is of the latter kind. And so we enter this forgotten place not as tourists or scholars, but as listeners, slow, reverent, allowing the darkness to guide our steps as though we are wandering through the dream of something once alive. At the city's threshold lies a road of pale marble slabs, washed smooth by centuries of winters, summers, footsteps, and forgetting. Moonlight slides over them like a silver river. Each stone holds a faint echo, a footfall from long ago, the creak of wagon wheels, the laughter of children running with bright-eyed dogs. It is all gone now, dissolved into silence. Yet the stones remember, and in their memory a soft warmth lingers. Whispers tell us that Heraclea was once a place of order, built with Roman precision, yet softened by local breath and belief. Its columns followed the geometry of empire, but its heart beat with the pulse of the valley, a valley that preferred stillness to ambition, moonlight to fire, reflection to noise. In forgotten corners, the marble seems to shimmer like water, not the water of rivers or lakes, but the water of memory, deep, slow-moving, undisturbed. Walking here feels like stepping into a submerged world, as though each footstep leaves a ripple that spreads into ancient depths. We pause beside a mosaic half buried in dust. The tesserae, tiny squares of stone and glass, catch the moonlight and glimmer faintly, like submerged stars rising from an oceanic floor. Blues, greens, soft whites, shapes that once formed wings, waves, or celestial patterns. The image is blurred now, but its intention still breathes through the broken pieces. It is as though the city once poured its dreams into these floors, hoping they would be walked upon by gentle feet. Some believe that mosaics are windows rather than decorations, windows into stories, windows into the hearts of those who shaped them. And kneeling before this fractured window, we sense that even in ruin, the city has not forgotten how to dream. We drift deeper into the ancient streets, guided by the faint glow of marble bathed in blue night light. A soft wind passes through a colonnade whose pillars stand like weary guardians. Chips of stone lie at their bases, fragments of fallen capitals worn into ocean-smooth curves. The wind moves between them as though whispering news from distant centuries, but its words remain veiled, understood only by the stones. Ahead rises the old theater. Even in ruin, it curves gracefully like a shell, amphitheater seating sweeping upward in broken arcs, each row a silent witness. Once, voices rose here in harmony, choruses of actors, murmured conversations, bursts of laughter,
prayers wrapped in song. Now only the night moves through the theater, soft-footed and patient. We step carefully down the ancient steps, our footsteps cushioned by moss and wild herbs that have claimed the stone. The air in the theater feels thick, not stagnant, but full of what was once spoken here, full of what may still echo if one listens with a heart prepared for silence. Somewhere in the darkness, a small night creature rustles. Its presence feels like an offering, a reminder that the city still shelters life, even if that life arrives quietly, without need of walls or applause. The rustle fades, the silence returns, and the theater exhales. We sit on one of the worn stone benches. The moon hangs above like a patient lantern. Each cracked surface gleams, each shadow deepens. And the city feels as though it is listening, not to us, but to the memory of voices that will never return. The theater is suspended in time's breath, holding on to a single note that was never finished. Perhaps that is what dreams are, unfinished songs, soft echoes, moments that continue even after the world has turned away. Leaving the theater, we wander toward a row of ruined arches. Some stand tall and resolute, others lean like tired travelers who have waited too long. A few still hold faint carvings, spirals, star-marked circles, delicate lines tracing symbols whose meanings have been erased by centuries of weather and wind. But beneath the silence, the carvings feel intentional, a forgotten language, a forgotten prayer, or perhaps a map of the city's dreaming. Myth tells us that a guardian spirit watched over Heraclea from the hills, a figure neither male nor divine, a presence woven from wind, starlight, and the valley's own ancient breath. This spirit, the stories say, shaped the city's fate with invisible hands, protecting it, warning it, listening to it, and when the city began to decay under the weight of time, the spirit did not abandon it. It merely shifted its watching from stone to silence. The locals believed that when the guardian was near, moonlight would linger longer on the marble, that animals would pause at the edge of the city, not in fear, but in acknowledgement, that travelers would feel a soft tug of intuition, guiding them either toward shelter or away from danger. And walking here now, beneath the moon's pale glow, it is easy to imagine such a presence, not as a ghost or deity, but as a quiet intelligence woven into the land. We approach the remains of a bath complex, its pools dry and scattered with dust. Once, warm water would have echoed here, rippling against marble steps, reflecting the faces of those seeking rest and renewal. The space feels colder now, but not lifeless. The empty pools resemble bowls left out for rain, their edges patiently waiting for the sky's offerings. In one corner, an old inscription lies half-buried, words from an empire that believed itself eternal. But empires fade, marble endures, and dreams, if cared for, outlast both. It is said the bathhouse was a place for both healing and prophecy, not through formal rites, but through simple moments, conversations murmured through steam, confessions shared between neighbors, old stories retold by elders whose voices rose like drifting incense. These moments, though unrecorded, shaped the soul of the city. Now, those rooms hold only wind. But the wind carries something faint, a sensation, a hint, a lingering warmth of human presence. When we return at last to the main road, the moon has climbed higher, bathing the entire city in pale blue radiance. The marble gleams like frost, the mosaics shimmer like submerged galaxies, and the arches, the theater, the bathhouse all feel connected, not by streets alone, but by the city's unbroken dream. for Heraclea dreams still. It dreams of footsteps, of laughter, of songs rising in harmony, of fires glowing in hearths, of market stalls spilling with herbs and pottery, of life. But it also dreams of silence, a silence not of abandonment, but of rest. Perhaps cities, like people, need both noise and quiet, both arrival and departure, both rising and falling. And in this valley, where empire once laid its heavy hand, the stillness feels earned, as though the city chose its sleep, folding itself into marble reflections and moon-dusted breath. We reach the final mosaic, the one scholars treasure, the one storytellers whisper about. A lone bird, wings outstretched, feathers shaped from tiny stone, white, black, dusky red, ocean green. It looks poised to rise from the floor itself, as if the next glimmer of moonlight will lift it into the air. Its eyes, though made of stone, hold a strange alertness, as if watching.
It begins at the edge of a quiet world. A river moves there, slow, dark, unhurried, as if cradling the dusk itself. Its surface is smooth as pressed silk, touched only by the faintest tremble of wind. This is the Kurna, the Black River, though in the hush of twilight it looks less black than deep blue, a ribbon of night unspooled across the valley. It glides through Macedonia with a patience beyond human measure, carrying centuries within its depths. It is said that the Kurna does not simply flow, it remembers. Some believe each bend in its path is shaped by a story, a migration, a ritual, a vanished voice. Others whisper that its name is a veil draped over secrets too tender to speak aloud. But here, standing at its edge, listening to its slow breath beneath the moon, another truth emerges. The river feels alive, like an ancient storyteller clearing its throat before speaking again. And on such nights, when the world grows still enough to hear, its stories begin to rise. The Kurna moves softly through the valley, gathering shadows from reeds and stars alike. Its waters have witnessed the passage of peoples whose footprints have long faded from the soil. Illyrian tribes once walked these shores, leaving offerings of bone and carved stone along the banks. Slavic wanderers camped beneath the overhanging cliffs, their fires mirrored in the water's black glass surface. Shepherds, priests, mothers, children, all paused beside the river at some point in their living. Some sought guidance, some sought forgiveness. Some simply sought a moment of stillness where the world could not follow. Whispers tell us that the Kurna keeps all of them, their names, their breaths, their forgotten songs, folded into its gentle current. Yet it never reveals more than a fragment, a ripple that widens and fades, a leaf that drifts in a spiral as though pulled by an unseen memory. A glimmer of reflected moonlight that flashes like an old signal from a distant time. The river, like memory itself, offers glimpses, but never the whole. As we follow its slow path, we drift into a landscape where history grows soft around the edges. The land embraces silence. Trees lean over the banks like listeners bending closer to a whispered confession. The night deepens, and the river begins to shimmer faintly, not with light, but with stories rising to its surface like bubbles of air released from ancient depths. We move along the water's edge, letting our thoughts match the pace of its flow. Along these banks, it is said that priests once cast offerings wrapped in leaves. The bundles contained grains, herbs, carved symbols, or the quiet intentions of those seeking blessings. The current gathered each offering not with hunger, but with gentleness, carrying it away as though delivering it to a hidden shrine farther downstream.
Farmers, too, came to the water, kneeling in the shallows at dawn to read omens in the drift of petals or the direction of floating seeds. They believed the river held wisdom older than the soil itself, a wisdom that moved in spirals and echoes, speaking in patterns rather than words. Children dipped their fingers into the stream, singing lullabies learned from grandparents who claimed the river hummed back with a voice too quiet for grown ears to hear. These lullabies traveled down generations like drifting seeds, shaped not by composer or scribe, by the river's own rhythm. Inevitably, history would overlook such things. Chronicles mention battles, borders, kings, but rivers remember differently. They remember the soft things, a dropped bracelet, a whispered wish, a name spoken only once before dissolving into time's long current. And as we walk beside the Kurna now, in this quiet night, we feel that soft remembering envelop us like a slow-moving mist. Above the river, cliffs rise in gentle arcs, softened by moss and moonlight. In their faces are carvings, faint, crumbling, nearly erased, spirals, star-marked circles, symbols that may have been shrines once, lit by torches whose smoke curled into the valley like lost prayers. Some believe hermits carved these cryptic shapes, seeking communion with the river spirit. Others insist they were markers left by wandering tribes, guiding travelers along a sacred path. But beneath such speculation lies another possibility, that these carvings were made simply from love of the river, love of the valley, love of the silence that wraps both like a shelter. Standing before them now, their meanings long dissolved, they feel less like messages and more like breaths frozen in stone. We reach out, we touch one. The stone is cool, veiled with dampness. The carving is shallow, but it holds the soft persistence of human intention. Perhaps the carving was an offering, perhaps a prayer, perhaps a name, perhaps no more than a desire to be remembered. The river flows below, gathering moonlight around its slow-moving shoulders, and time loosens. It becomes fluid, like the water itself. As we continue, the river widens into a soft bend. Reeds whisper in the dark. Their thin bodies sway with each small wind, creating a sound almost like murmured voices. The night animals stir. A heron lifts from the water with wings that beat like muffled drums. A fox passes quietly, leaving only a ripple in the grass. Everything moves gently, in harmony with the river's slow breath. Beneath the water, stones glint faintly. Some are smooth from centuries of turning, others are etched with shapes that no longer resemble their original forms. But every stone, every pebble has been touched by stories that have worn them down, softened their edges, shaped their quiet shine. Here, at the river's bend, time feels suspended. Past and present overlap like reflections. A shepherd from 1,000 years ago might step into this very water, and the ripples would look the same as they do now. We kneel at the edge and dip our fingers in. The river is cool, silky, alive. It moves around our skin with a tenderness that feels almost knowing, as though it recognizes this gesture, as though it has felt it countless times before, from hands that no longer exist in the faint ripples of memory. In this moment, the river becomes not simply water, but a vast, liquid archive of human presence. Names lost to time drift here, not written, not spoken, but remembered. Remembered by the Kurna alone. Further downstream, the river narrows again, passing through a small gorge where the cliffs lean close, almost touching above the water. Torches once burned here during rites the valley no longer speaks of. The river carried their ashes away, along with the chants that rose into the night like smoke. The gorge amplifies the sound of the current. It echoes softly against the stone walls, creating an illusion of voices just beyond hearing. Some believe these are the river's own speech, shaped by the stone into something like language. Others say the echoes are the remains of prayers, but perhaps they are simply reminders that even silence has texture and even stillness has memory. We move through the gorge slowly, letting the echoes guide us. Each one feels like a distant footstep, a distant breath, a distant name. Names the river once held, once whispered, once carried to sea. Names that might still linger beneath its surface, like sleeping fish. When the gorge widens, the landscape opens back up into soft meadowland. The river flows gently here, as though relieved from the narrowness of stone. The moon hangs low above, casting a shimmering path across the surface, a path that looks like an invitation into some unseen world. We follow this moonlit path with our eyes until it disappears around a bend. Some voices, it is said, only echo when we are ready to listen, and the river feels like one of those voices, soft, patient, never demanding. Perhaps that is why it has carried so many forgotten names, not to hide them, but to keep them safe, until the world becomes quiet enough to feel their presence again. We sit beside the river now, letting its slow rhythm pull time apart. The air cools, the grass bends, the stars tremble in their celestial cradle. And in this gentle moment, the Kurna feels less like a river and more like a threshold, a place where memory flows in two directions at once, into the past, into the future, without ever stopping in the present for more than a breath. Perhaps the river remembers more than we ever will. Perhaps it remembers everything, but it shares only what the moonlight allows. And tonight, that is enough.
It begins with an object that seems too fragile to bear the weight of centuries. A single clay tablet lies half buried in the soil, its cracked surface touched by drifting dust and the soft breath of wind. The evening light, gentle as old silk, glances across the etched markings carved long ago by hands that no longer exist. The symbols are faint, curved lines, star-like impressions, spirals that rise and collapse, forming a language we cannot read, a whisper we can only imagine. It is said that this tablet was found near ancient Pelagonia, where the plains stretch like pages left open beneath the sky. And though it is small, though it is crumbling, though it seems to belong to a world so quiet it might vanish if we blink, the air around it feels charged, as if the clay is still holding the breath of unwritten stories. We bend close. Dust shivers. The wind shifts, and something ancient stirs. This is the threshold of a library, not one of stone or scroll-lined halls, but a library shaped by wind and earth, carried in fragments across forgotten landscapes. A library without shelves, without doors, without guardians, except for time itself. And tonight, we are invited to wander inside. In forgotten corners of the earth, whispers tell us that long before ink-stained parchment, long before books stacked themselves into towering archives, knowledge lived briefly in clay. Secrets were pressed into wet earth by reed styluses. Wisdom was folded into tablets that dried under sun and moonlight, hardened into vessels of memory. But Pelagonia's tablets were different. Archaeologists find few. Stories suggest many. Myth insists that scribes once traveled the plains, recording not laws or ledgers, but dreamlike reflections, poems to the wind, invocations to unseen spirits, soft recollections of celestial events. These scribes belonged to no kingdom. They served no ruler. They were wanderers who believed the earth itself would protect their words. Some believe the clay was sacred. Some believe it was simply the material at hand. But all agree the tablets were not meant for permanence. And yet, some survived.
This one rests before us now, fragile as breath. We begin to walk through the imaginary library that once stretched across these plains, not built by architects, but by the passing of time itself. The sky above Pelagonia is vast and pale, holding the fading glow of dusk. The grass bends in waves, as though bowing to the wind's slow procession. The air carries faint scents of dust, sage, and distant rain. It is here that scribes once knelt, shaping their tablets from fine river-softened clay. Their fingers moved gently, sculpting squares and rectangles that fit neatly in palm or pouch. They pressed symbols into the damp surface, marks representing sounds, rituals, constellations, incantations. Some shapes were simple, others spiraled into intricate patterns that seemed to echo the movements of the stars. But these scribes, unlike those of great cities, did not store their tablets in vaults or libraries. They left them exposed to sun, to wind, to rain, to the quiet indifference of the earth. Some tablets dried and cracked, some dissolved in storms, some were buried under shifting soil, and some disappeared entirely. It is here we encounter the strange tension of Pelagonia's memory, the balance between what survives and what dissolves, between human intention and the wide patience of time. Perhaps the scribes believed that knowledge should be free to wander, like wind. Perhaps they knew that permanence can become a cage. Perhaps they trusted the earth to choose what endured. Or, perhaps, and this seems most likely, here in the darkening light, they accepted that wisdom is a living thing, meant to breathe, not to be trapped. We move further into the plains, letting the wind guide us. It brushes against our skin like the fluttering of unseen pages. Each gust carries the faint impression of voices, not words, not sentences, but tones, echoes. The rise and fall of dialects no tongue has spoken in 1,000 years. Some voices feel sharp, like chimes made from bone. Others are soft, like reeds bending near water. Still others vibrate with melodic qualities, as though meant to be sung. These are the ghost languages of Pelagonia. No scroll records them, no inscription preserves them fully, yet they linger, carried by the wind in hints and half-echoes, like fragments of a lullaby remembered just before sleep. We imagine the scribes speaking these languages as they worked, their breath mingling with clay, their murmurs etched into the tablets in ways we can no longer perceive. Their thoughts lifted into the air, carried toward the hills where myth claims a guardian spirit once listened to the voices of the plains. And in the distance, barely visible, we see the silhouettes of earthen mounds, places where tablets may still sleep beneath layers of soil and dust, not waiting to be found, merely resting. A storm approaches, not a violent one. Here, storms arrive like slow-moving veils, heavy with the scent of rain and the hum of sky-charged energy. The clouds gather above the plains, drifting like dark scrolls unrolling across the horizon. Lightning flickers silently in their depths, illuminating distant ridges in brief strokes of white fire. It is said that storms were both friend and foe to this ancient library. Rain softened tablets, erasing lines like breath across frosted glass. Wind scattered them, lifting fragments and carrying them into new lands. Lightning struck the ground, baking clay shards into unexpected permanence. Thus, the library rewrote itself constantly, not through human hands, but through the choreography of nature. Some tablets were destroyed, some were preserved, some were transformed into brittle pieces of baked earth that survived centuries longer than their makers ever expected. This constant shift created a library like any other, one in which knowledge was both vulnerable and resilient, sacred and ephemeral, intentional and accidental. To walk through it now is to walk between those contradictions. We stand at the edge of the approaching storm, listening to its deep oceanic murmur. The plains darken, the wind thickens, carrying the scent of rain-soaked soil. Perhaps we think this is how the scribes intended their words to live, not locked away, but exposed to the vast intelligence of wind, water, and time. As the wind calms and the first drops fall, we seek shelter beneath an overhanging ridge. The stone above us bears faint markings, not carved, but naturally formed spirals etched by erosion or ancient river flow. These spirals mirror the ones pressed into the clay tablet we carry. Coincidence? Or the echo of something the scribes observed and imitated? Rain begins to patter gently on the stone. The plains darken into deep brown, clay red, and misty green. A scent rises, petrichor, rich and ancient, carrying the essence of centuries trapped in dust. We hold the cracked tablet in our hands, brushing aside grains of dirt. What remains of its symbols is as delicate as a memory half buried in sleep. Lines curve into shapes that might represent wind. Dots gather as if marking stars. Spirals unfurl like questions without answers. In the dim light, the tablet feels less like a message and more like a sigh, a soft exhale from someone who lived long ago, someone who trusted the earth to keep her voice safe, even if that voice might only whisper faintly from beneath the soil. Perhaps the tablet was never meant to be understood fully. Perhaps clarity would diminish its magic. Perhaps the beauty lies in its partial silence. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. The storm passes, moving eastward, leaving behind a fresh sheen on the ground. The sky opens again, revealing a twilight that glows in hues of faded copper and pale blue. The air feels newly washed, as though the world has been gently rewritten. We step back into the plains, carrying the tablet with care. The earth feels soft beneath our feet, as though the soil itself remembers being molded by ancient hands. As we walk, the wind rises again, not strong, but steady. It moves across the land like the turning of a great page. It picks up grains of dust, lifting them into shimmering clouds that drift like pale ghosts through the air. It is here, in this interplay of dust and wind, that the Library of Pelagonia continues to speak. Not in full sentences, not in preserved knowledge, but in textures, in sensations, in fragments of story carried on air. A scribe's lost breath becoming the movement of wind, a forgotten symbol becoming a pattern in drifted dust, a broken tablet becoming soil that nourishes the plains. Knowledge dissolving.
It begins with a footprint, a single, faint impression pressed into hardened mud. Shallow, blurred at the edges, its maker long vanished into the folds of time. Yet it remains, holding the whisper of a journey unfinished. A reminder that someone once passed here, moving between worlds, guided only by the soft murmur of an ancient road. It is said that this road, winding through the hills of Macedonia, was once a lifeline between kingdoms. Traders led their laden animals across it. Soldiers marched with steady resolve. Pilgrims walked barefoot, seeking blessings from distant temples. And travelers of all kinds traced its gentle curves, trusting that the path knew where it must lead. But whispers tell us something else. That when twilight settles over the land, the shadows along this road lengthen, lingering as though waiting for travelers who will never return. They gather softly at the edges, patient, unhurried, neither welcoming nor warning, merely watching. And so we begin our journey along this ancient path, guided first by a footprint, then by silence. The road itself is simple. A soft, rutted thread carved into the earth by centuries of passing feet. Grass grows in the center, wild herbs press close from both sides, and small stones shift beneath our steps like quiet sighs. The air is cool, touched by the last breath of day. Shadows stretch gently across the ground, forming long, delicate bars of dusk. Some believe that roads hold memories. Others believe that roads create them.
Perhaps both are true, for this road seems to remember everything. We walk slowly, letting time loosen its hold. Here, layers of history rise like soft echoes, overlapping, dissolving, reforming. Roman milestones stand at intervals, leaning like tired sentinels who have waited too long for someone to greet them. Their carved numbers are worn to near ghostliness, softened by centuries of wind and rain. They seem to bow as we pass, not in deference, but in exhaustion. Between these milestones lie places where travelers once paused, patches of flattened earth, circles of stone where small fires once glowed. Wild thyme and rosemary now grow where tents once stood. If one kneels, one may see the remnants of charcoal hidden beneath the soil, a black trace that speaks without words. In the soft twilight, the air thickens with memory. This road is not merely a route. It is a corridor of lives passed through silence. Whispers tell us that in ancient days, pilgrims built tiny shrines along the path, small stacks of stones topped with feathers, beads, or leaves, left as offerings to unseen guardians. No two shrines were alike. Some were simple, others bore faint carvings, worn now to near invisibility. These shrines marked not destinations, but hopes. Protection for the miles ahead, safety from unseen dangers, strength for weary feet. We find one now, hidden beneath a tangle of grass. A few stones, a bit of pottery, a fragment of bone smoothed by weather. Nothing impressive, yet unmistakably intentional, a quiet plea preserved in the language of earth. In forgotten corners of the world, shrines such as this served as bridges between the physical and the unseen, not to summon miracles, but to acknowledge the mystery of walking into the unknown. Travelers left pieces of themselves behind, believing that part of their spirit would remain rooted here, guiding them as they continued onward. And perhaps that is why the shadows linger, not as omens, but as memories. As we follow the path deeper into dusk, the landscape changes. The hills rise around us, forming gentle walls that embrace the road. The sky dims, shifting from clay red to dusk sky blue, then to soft, smoky gray. A faint breeze drifts through the valley, carrying the scent of distant pine and crushed herbs. The more we walk, the quieter the world becomes. Even the birds fall silent, retreating to the safety of trees whose silhouettes tremble against the fading sky. The last insects of the day hum a soft, steady rhythm, a lullaby layered over centuries. And the road, ancient and unhurried, continues to wind forward, its curves never revealing their destination. It is here we sense the truth behind the legend. This road was not merely a way between places. It was a place unto itself, a threshold, a passage, a gentle crossing between the known and the unknown, and sometimes between the self we carry and the self we are becoming. We pause beside an overhanging tree, where roots grip the earth like ancient hands. Beneath it, we see faint scratches on stone. Not writing, not symbols, but perhaps a mark made absent-mindedly by a traveler resting here long ago. The mark feels like an echo of human presence, a quiet insistence that someone paused, breathed, reflected. It is said the road changes those who walk it, not through revelation, but through repetition, through the steady act of placing one foot before the other. With each step, worries unwind. With each curve, thoughts soften. With each rustle of grass, the distance between past and present grows thin. As we continue, the path narrows and the shadows deepen. They gather not with menace, but with familiarity, like companions walking silently beside us. In their presence, we feel the weight of all who walked before, wanderers whose names were swallowed by distance, who crossed borders that no longer exist, who left no records except the faint hollows of their footsteps. We cannot see them, but the road remembers. Night settles slowly, like a veil drawn with deliberate care. The moon rises, casting pale silver over the path. The shadows shift, becoming longer, softer, less distinct. They move gently between the trees, along the ruts of the road, across fallen stones that once formed parts of Roman walls. Under the moonlight, the road becomes luminous, a soft ribbon of faded silver stretching into the dark. The milestones glow faintly, the shrines shimmer with dew. The herbs release their scents into the cool air, filling the night with earthy sweetness. The solitude deepens, but it does not feel lonely. It feels sacred. Here, beneath the silence, we sense the presence of something ancient, not a spirit, not a ghost, but the quiet intelligence of the road itself. It has witnessed so much, carried so many, held so many hopes and fears. It has been shaped by countless decisions, countless departures, countless returns. And yet, it remains humble, unfinished, open. Perhaps this is why the shadows wait along its edges. Perhaps they wait not for travelers to fear them, but for travelers to remember them, to acknowledge the unspoken truth that every journey is a dialogue between the traveler and the path. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. And on this road, the echoes are soft. A fragment of laughter left by a passing caravan, a whispered prayer offered by a lonely pilgrim, a lullaby sung to a child carried upon tired shoulders, all fading, all lingering, all woven into the quiet tapestry of the path. At last, the road bends one final time, but instead of continuing, it begins to fade, its ruts softening into grass, its stones sinking into soil, its edges dissolving into the shadows of the night. It does not end suddenly. It dissolves gently, as if retreating from the realm of the living into the realm of dreams. We stand where the path disappears. There is no milestone here, no shrine, no marker of any kind. Only darkness, only stillness, only the faint shimmer of moonlight on distant hills. And in this silence, a truth rises, soft as breath. Some roads do not lead outward, some lead inward, into memory, into longing, into the quiet chambers of the soul. The road where shadows waited was never meant to guide travelers to a city or a kingdom. It was meant to guide them to themselves. We turn away softly, letting the night embrace the fading path. The shadows shift once more, then settle into their patient resting places along the unseen road. Perhaps they were never waiting for travelers at all. Perhaps they were simply keeping watch. Perhaps the road still dreams of those who walked it, holding their presence like faint starlight caught in dust. And as we walk back through the night, we carry with us the gentle certainty that some journeys are not meant to be finished, only felt.
It begins with a veil. A silver mist rising from the surface of Lake Prespa just as twilight loosens its grip on the mountains. The air grows cool, and the lake turns into a vast, breathing mirror where nothing is fully itself. Mountains dissolve into elongated shadows, sky melts into water, and in the shimmering, half-formed reflection, an island appears, neither rooted in earth nor floating in cloud, but suspended softly between the two. On this island stands an old monastery, its walls pale with age, its roof marked by storms and centuries of quiet devotion. Yet, in the lake's trembling reflection, it looks like a dream, an echo of stone floating atop a liquid sky. It is said the mist here never behaves like ordinary weather. Some believe it is the breath of submerged villages. Others insist it is the exhale of ancient spirits who once walked the lake's shores. And a few whisper, only in hushed tones, that the mist is a veil, a boundary between the world we know and the world Prespa chooses to hide. Tonight, as the mist thickens,
that boundary feels thin enough to touch. We glide toward it, letting the silence settle around us like a slow-moving tide. The lake stretches wide, its surface as smooth as glass touched by moonlight. Each small ripple glitters with the softness of something sacred. There are no hurried movements here, no loud voices, no mechanical intrusions, only the sound of water brushing gently against our vessel, a sound so delicate it feels like a whisper rising from the deep. Whispers tell us that beneath Lake Prespa lie the ruins of villages long abandoned, houses swallowed by rising waters, bell towers whose chimes once marked the rhythm of life, walls that now shimmer like ghostly reefs beneath the surface. And though no diver has brought back clear proof, those who grow up near the lake learn to listen. They learn that on certain nights, when the wind shifts just so, faint bell tones drift upward, not loud, not clear, but soft as breath. A sound with no visible source, a memory refusing to dim. Whether these bells once belonged to real villages, or whether they are simply the lake's own voice, no one can say. But in the hush of the evening, their possibility alone is enough to keep us drifting forward. The mist parts slightly, revealing the island ahead, a small patch of land rising from the water like the back of a sleeping creature. Cypress trees cluster at its edges, tall and thin, their silhouettes trembling in the wind. At the highest point sits the monastery, ancient and weather-softened, its structure built not for grandeur, but for quiet endurance. It is said hermit monks once chose this island for its silence, believing that the lake's vastness amplified prayers, sending them across the water like lanterns drifting into the night. Their chants were simple, their offerings small, their rituals shaped by the rhythm of solitude. They lived with little but found much. For the world beyond the lake, with its wars and ambitions, seemed far away here, softened by distance, blurred by mist. Some believe these monks were guardians of a hidden truth. Others say they simply sought a place where the heart could breathe. But the result was the same, a monastery that feels less like a building and more like a pause in time. As we draw closer, the air grows cooler, the scent of wet stone rises, and the stillness deepens into something that feels almost alive. We step onto the island with quiet feet. The ground beneath is a soft mix of soil and stone, carpeted in fallen needles from the cypresses. The trees sway gently, creating a sound like distant chanting. The air feels untouched, as though it has held the same purity for centuries. The monastery stands before us, simple in form but rich in presence. Its entrance is worn, the archway chipped and lichen-dusted. Inside, shadows settle like old memories. There are fragments of frescoes on the walls, figures half visible, their colors faded into hues of misty green and clay red. Time has softened every edge. We light no torch. We make no sound. We simply breathe. For in this dim hallway, silence feels like its own sacred language. It is said monks once left scrolls here, handwritten, fragile, filled with prayers and star-marked diagrams meant to guide the wandering mind. None survive intact, yet we feel their echo. In the quiet corners of the room, imagination brings them to life. Curled parchment softened with age, ink strokes shaped like waves or wings, the faint scent of olive oil and smoke. Each imagined scroll becomes a window into a world where devotion was not loud but luminous. Leaving the monastery, we return to the shoreline. The mist has thickened again, drifting around the trees like a slow-moving curtain. The lake surface is now a pale silver, reflecting nothing clearly. Water, sky, and mountain blur into one continuous breath. Here, where memory fades and the senses soften, natural history and myth intertwine. Migrating birds pass overhead, tracing ancient flight paths engraved in instincts older than any kingdom. Some dip low toward the water, their wings catching moonlight before vanishing into the mist. Locals say these birds know the old ruins beneath the lake, that they circle certain spots before continuing their journey, acknowledging something the human eye can no longer see. Perhaps the birds follow magnetic currents. Perhaps they follow ancestral memory. Or perhaps they follow whispers from the deep, signals from a world the lake keeps hidden beneath its silver veil. Whatever the truth, the effect is the same. Each wingbeat feels like a punctuation mark in an unspoken story. We drift once more onto the water, letting the lake guide our movement. The mist curls around us, twisting into shapes that resemble figures, not clearly human, not clearly anything, just hints of presence. They fade as quickly as they form. The lake feels impossibly old, older than the monastery, older, perhaps, than the submerged villages, older, perhaps, than the stories themselves. Some believe Lake Prespa existed before the mountains rose around it, shaped by forces deeper and older than myth. Others believe the lake was once smaller, then swelled as the land cracked with ancient tremors, swallowing villages not through malice but through inevitability. But in the poetic traditions of the region, the lake is alive, a being with memory and mood, a guardian, a keeper of stories too tender to carry in the open. As we float across the mirrored surface, we feel the truth of that belief. The lake's silence is powerful, not empty. It feels like an embrace, gentle, protective, unwilling to reveal too much. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen, and Prespa's voice is a quiet hymn, sung beneath breath. Mist begins to thicken heavier, erasing the edges of the mountains. Even the island fades into an outline of shadows. The cypresses blur, the monastery dissolves into the silver air. Everything becomes one soft shape, world and reflection merging into a single veil. We glide slowly, letting the unseen currents carry us. The lake's heartbeat, steady, ancient, oceanic, seems to pulse beneath us. A faint toll rings through the mist. A bell? A stone shifting beneath the waves? The call of a bird swallowed by fog? No matter how gently we listen, the source remains hidden. But the sound lingers, soft and sacred, like a memory rising briefly before sinking again. Perhaps the bell belongs to a submerged village. Perhaps it belongs to the monastery. Perhaps it belongs to the lake itself. Or perhaps it is simply our own longing echoing back to us. As the mist closes in, the world grows weightless. Boundaries dissolve. Water becomes sky. Sky becomes water. And we become part of the dream Prespa has been dreaming for centuries. We close our eyes. We breathe. We allow the lake's quiet song to wrap around us like a gentle cloak. In this moment, the stories feel close, not fully revealed, not fully hidden, but drifting somewhere at the edge of understanding. Like ruins glimpsed beneath shallow depths, like a word forgotten but still felt in the heart. And as the final veil of fog drapes itself over the island, the monastery fades completely. Not lost, not gone, merely absorbed into the lake's long memory. We feel a soft ache then, a tenderness born from wonder. The sense that Prespa guards something too old, too fragile, too dear to show in full. Perhaps it was never meant to be found. Perhaps its beauty lies in the mystery. And as we drift back toward the shore,
it begins with a silence so complete it feels almost ceremonial. At the edge of a quiet Macedonian village, where dust gathers like old memory and the hills curve softly into one another, a field of stone figures rises from the earth, tall, still, unmoving. They stand in rows and clusters, some leaning slightly, as though frozen mid-gesture,
Others straight and solemn like guardians who long ago accepted their vigil. In the pale light of early dusk, they resemble a congregation waiting for a voice that will never arrive. It is said these pillars were not shaped by human hands. Their forms, elongated, irregular, hauntingly familiar, emerged through the slow alchemy of nature, rain carving its patient script into volcanic soil, frost splitting stone with quiet deliberation, centuries smoothing sharp edges into softer echoes of human shape. And yet, local legend tells a different tale. Whispers say these stones were once living people, villagers caught in a moment of heartbreak or betrayal, turned to stone by forces older than the mountains themselves. Others claim they were transformed by divine intervention, their mortal forms sealed forever in rock as punishment or protection. Some stories speak of a wedding interrupted by jealous spirits. Others tell of ancestral guardians offended by broken vows. Whatever the truth, the field remains, eerie, sacred, dreamlike. And tonight, we wander into it as though stepping into a forgotten ritual. The stones rise from the earth like a choir of silent witnesses. Some stand close together, their shapes merging at the base. Others are solitary, separated by small valleys of grass and wildflowers. The air between them feels thick, not oppressive, but filled with the faint hum of presence, like the lingering breath of a ceremony long ended. We move slowly, letting the world soften around us. The sky above deepens into dusk sky blue, and the first delicate stars flicker awake. A breeze drifts through the stone field, brushing against the pillars with a sound like robes rustling, though nothing moves. Dust rises in gentle spirals, catching the last light of day. Each stone holds its own posture. One leans forward, as though mourning. Another tilts back, as if listening to something behind it. Others stand rigid, their surfaces streaked with clay-red veins, their tops smoothed by wind and time. As we pass between them, they seem less like geological curiosities and more like frozen moments, gestures suspended in stone, arrested breaths lingering in air that refuses to age. Local legends weave themselves through the pillars like invisible threads. Children of Kuklaka grow up hearing tales whispered by parents and grandparents as the night settles around their homes. Some believe the stones are wedding guests caught in a moment of jealousy, a groom who tried to marry two brides on the same day, discovered and punished. The earth, unwilling to tolerate such betrayal, hardened them all into stone. Others say the figures are star-marked guardians who rose from the soil to protect the valley during a time of great conflict. When the danger passed, they remained, unwilling to return to their celestial form. Another tale speaks of a couple whose love angered the ancestral spirits. As they fled toward the hills, their tears became rivers, their footsteps became shadows, and their bodies finally became stone, rooted to the land they loved, unable to escape the fate woven into their lineage. Is any of this true? Perhaps not in the way stories are usually measured. But standing here, surrounded by these silent shapes, truth feels less like a point and more like a mist, drifting, luminous, refusing to settle entirely. Beneath the silence, the geological story hums. The land here is shaped by volcanic forces from ages long before human memory. Soft, tough rock, sculpted by erosion, forms fragile columns that shift and evolve over centuries. Rain cuts grooves into the stone. Frost cracks the pillars into jagged silhouettes. Wind polishes their surfaces until they gleam faintly under moonlight. Science explains their form with calm precision. But science cannot explain their presence, for there is something profoundly human in these shapes. A tilt of a head, a suggestion of arms, a sense of community or loneliness among the groupings. Some stand clustered like families huddled for warmth. Others rise alone, tall and slender, gazing eternally toward the horizon. A few seem to lean toward one another, as though sharing a secret too tender for the world to know. Here, the boundary between earth and myth dissolves softly, like dust settling on an untouched book. We continue to wander through the field, weaving between the silent figures. The ground is uneven, soft in places, firm in others, shaped by the slow shifting of soil beneath the weight of centuries. The air cools as dusk thickens. It is said that if one stands among these stones at twilight, the valley grows unusually still. Birds quiet their calls. The wind hesitates. Even insects pause, as though honoring a moment older than themselves. The silence deepens into something more than absence. It becomes presence. We feel that now. Every footstep echoes slightly. Every breath seems louder than it should. Every shadow stretches with a deliberate calm. The stones do not move, and yet they seem aware. At the far edge of the field, we find one of the oldest pillars, taller than the rest, its surfaces marked by spirals and grooves carved by countless seasons of ice and rain. Its base is thick, anchoring it firmly into the earth. Its upper half narrows into a shape almost reminiscent of a head, though worn by time beyond recognition. Some villagers call this the elder. Others call it the first witness. A few avoid naming it at all. It stands alone, gazing toward the distant hills. We stand beside it, feeling the weight of its silence. It is not threatening. It is not warm. It is simply present, a pillar of stone holding the memory of thousands of sunrises, thousands of storms, thousands of voices carried on wind. Perhaps this stone once looked like something very different. Perhaps it will look different centuries from now. Time moves gently here, but it never stops. The elder reminds us that permanence is an illusion. Even stone dreams of becoming dust. As the last light of day fades, the field grows darker. The stones, once pale against the sky, become silhouettes, shifting subtly as shadows lengthen. They appear closer now, taller, as though stepping forward from the earth to join the night's slow ritual. The air fills with a strange tenderness, like standing inside the echo of an old song. Each formation becomes more than stone. This one holds grief. That one holds longing. Another carries the faint outline of joy. Another seems to bow under the weight of years. We cannot explain these impressions. We can only feel them. It is said that places touched by sorrow retain an echo of it, not to burden those who visit, but to remind them of the depth of human experience. Kuklika's stone figures hold such echoes, not loudly, not tragically, but gently, like pages turned by a soft breeze. The stones have witnessed much, and forgotten little. As night settles fully, the sky turns dark and star-splashed, and the moon rises slowly over the valley. Its light spreads across the stone field, illuminating each pillar with a soft silver glow. Now the stones resemble a choir, 100 silent silhouettes standing in formation, a gathering of shadows and moonlit outlines, a congregation holding a hymn no ear can hear. Their shapes catch the light, and for a brief moment they seem to vibrate, not physically, but spiritually, as if responding to some ancient melody carried on the night wind. Perhaps the land still sings to them. Perhaps they still remember the songs of those who wandered here long before us. Perhaps they are the song. In this quiet moment, the boundary between earth and story dissolves entirely. We no longer see rocks shaped by erosion. We see figures, witnesses, echoes of lives lived or imagined. A choir formed not by faith or fear, but by the gentle collaboration of time and belief. Nature sculpted their bodies, myth sculpted their meaning, and together they form a story too old to hold fully, too tender to explain completely. We stand still, letting the moonlight settle around us. The stones cast long shadows stretching toward one another, forming a tapestry of lines across the earth. Perhaps the stones wait. It begins with a mark so faint it could vanish if one breathed too deeply. On a weathered stone tucked into the folds of Macedonia's forested interior, a carving rests, the outline of a lion, its form little more than a suggestion. Time has softened its edges. Moss curls along its mane. Cracks run through its jaw like forgotten roads. And yet, even in this eroded state, the carving holds a quiet gravity, as though it remembers a purpose older than history and more patient than stone. It is said that this lion once watched over a sanctuary, now swallowed by trees. Whispers tell us that warriors left their weapons here, laying them at the foot of ancient oaks so the forest might cool the heat of battle in their hearts. Others speak of seekers, wanderers who came not for war but for silence, hoping to hear wisdom in the hush between the wind and the leaves. They say that beneath these boughs, meditation thrived long before any temple was carved, long before any monastery rose. And though no chronicler recorded this place, and no official shrine remains, the forest breathes as though guarding a memory too delicate to reveal openly. Tonight, we step into that breath. The stone lion watches as we cross into the clearing. Its body is only half-shaped now, a torso fading into the rock, paws merging with the earth. But its gaze, though uncarved, seems fixed upon us. Not intimidating, not even stern, simply steady. A reminder that courage is not always the roar of battle, but the willingness to walk into silence without knowing what will be found there. Around the stone, the forest leans inward. Oaks rise tall and gentle, their trunks spiraling upward as though carrying prayers into sky. Moss drapes from their roots in soft strands, forming green veils that ripple when touched by wind. The air is thick with the scent of damp soil and late-season leaves. A hush settles over the clearing, not emptiness, not lack, but presence, a deep, velvety quiet that suggests the sanctuary never truly disappeared. It only softened into the landscape. We breathe slowly, and the world breathes with us. It is said that the sanctuary was never a place of grandeur. No tall pillars, no carved gates, no sacred frescoes painted with precious pigments. Instead, its beauty lay in stillness. Seekers came from distant hills to sit beneath the oaks, listening to the rhythm of their own breath mingling with the forest's sigh. Warriors, weary of conflict, placed their blades at the base of certain stones, stones polished not by tools, but by countless hands releasing weight. Some stones still rest here, half hidden under roots. Smooth, cool, silent. Others have toppled, their corners softened by centuries of rain. A few bear faint markings, spirals carved with hesitant hands, star-like dots arranged in uncertain patterns. Whether these were symbols of devotion, protection, or simply expressions of gratitude is unknown. But the ground remembers, the air remembers, and we remember, even without knowing why. Paths thread through the forest like quiet thoughts, winding, meandering, returning to themselves. They do not follow strict lines. They drift, they curve, they spiral. Walking them feels like walking inside one's own memory, moving deeper without realizing where the path shifts from outer world to inner reflection. We follow one such path now. Leaves crunch softly beneath our steps. Light filters through the branches in golden shafts, dust motes drifting like tiny wandering spirits. The earth here is dark and rich, shaped by roots that coil like ancient stories. It feels warm, even as night approaches. Along the path, we pass what might once have been altars, stones arranged with gentle intention. Not tall enough for offerings meant to impress, not ornate enough for royal rites, but sufficient for small gestures, a feather placed with care, a sprig of herbs laid atop moss, a carved token left as a quiet promise. The forest has absorbed these offerings over time. Moss thickens on their edges, leaves gather in their hollows. Yet the stones still hold a subtle energy, a sense that something sacred once passed between human hands and earth. Perhaps the sanctuary welcomed kings. Perhaps it welcomed farmers. Perhaps it welcomed all who entered with sincerity. The forest does not explain. It simply continues. As we walk, contradictions rise like soft waves. Was this a sacred abode of ancient rulers, or a humble refuge for wanderers? A temple of power, or a grove of healing? A place where people sought answers, or a place where they came to lose their questions? We examine each idea gently, letting it drift through us without clinging. In some eras, leaders valued silence as deeply as soldiers valued strength. They may have come here to retreat from the weight of decision. In other eras, the poor may have discovered solace beneath these same trees, grateful for a space where hardship eased into the earth. Perhaps the sanctuary changed purpose with each visitor. Perhaps the lion carving means one thing to kings and another to the humble. Perhaps the forest welcomes both without distinction. Standing here, the contradictions do not clash. They coexist with the same peace that threads through the leaves. Truth in this sanctuary is not a single point. It is a circle widening into night. We continue deeper into the clearing until the forest opens like a slow exhale. Moonlight spills over the ground, turning the grass into a pale, shimmering veil. The stones, altar or boundary, marker or memory, glow faintly, absorbing the silver radiance. The air cools. The shadows lengthen. Time eases its grip. It is here, in this moonlit quiet, that the sanctuary's old rhythm stirs. Some believe that if one stands still in this clearing, the lion's spirit rises, not as a creature of flesh, but as a feeling, a warmth, a presence, a guide, not toward action, but toward clarity, toward courage of a quieter kind, the courage to face one's own thoughts without armor, to lay down inner weapons, to listen. We close our eyes. Wind brushes our skin, light as breath. Leaves rustle in a rhythm older than language. The earth beneath our feet feels steady, cradling. And somewhere in that silence, we sense the lion, not watching, not judging, simply being, inviting us to do the same. To wander further into the sanctuary is to wander deeper into oneself. The paths twist inward now, following spirals carved by roots and terrain. The forest grows denser, not physically, but emotionally, as though each step brings us closer to something unspoken. We pass a circle of stones whose arrangement suggests meaning, though none is clear. They might have been seats for meditation, or markers of seasons, or simply rocks moved aside by travelers clearing a place to rest. Meaning here is not fixed, it is felt. We imagine warriors sitting quietly, letting the tension in their limbs soften. We imagine seekers tracing spirals on the stones with fingertip, following lines that resemble the cycles of the moon, or the movements of the stars, or the patterns of thought. Perhaps scrolls were once unrolled here, though none survive. Perhaps chants once rose here, though none remain. Perhaps the sanctuary was filled with whispers, now carried only by wind. Whatever this place once held, its essence remains uncluttered. Stillness, breath, the sacred simplicity of being. At the farthest point of the grove, we find a stone half buried beneath oak roots. It bears the faint outline of another lion, more eroded than the first, nearly invisible. The roots wrap around it like arms, holding it tenderly, as though the forest wishes to keep it hidden. We touch its surface gently. The stone is cool. Textures shift under our fingers. The carving vibrates with quiet age. Some believe this second lion was the heart of the sanctuary. Others think it was placed here as a boundary stone, marking the edge of sacred ground. The forest, as always, keeps its secrets. But a sense of closure settles in the air, not as an ending, but a soft return. We have walked the spiraling path. We have touched the stones. We have listened to the silence. We have felt the sanctuary breathing through moss and leaves. And now the sanctuary exhales. The moon brightens overhead. The wind shifts. The forest releases us. The lion fades back into rock and night, dissolving into its ancient role as a quiet guardian. Not proven, not solved, simply present. We return the way we came, though the path feels different now. The oaks lean closer, as though recognizing us. The moss glows faintly in the silver light. The stones appear softer, gentler, as though they have shared just enough. Perhaps the sanctuary was never meant to be uncovered in certainty. Perhaps its purpose was always meant.
And now, dear traveler, the path through these silent Macedonian hills grows dim once more. The hidden kingdom we have wandered, with its buried gates and whispering stones, fades gently back into the folds of night. What we have seen here was never meant to be claimed, or held, or proven. It was meant simply to be felt, a quiet stirring in the deep places of memory, a soft echo from a world that drifts between history and dreaming. If your eyes grow heavy, let them rest. If your breath has slowed, let it become the rhythm that carries you farther inward. For some journeys continue only when the waking world loosens its hold. Perhaps the kingdom behind Macedonia's hills still lies there, guarded by moss and moonlight. Perhaps it lives only in the hush between stories. Or perhaps it has found a home within you now, a place you can return to whenever sleep calls you back. Thank you for wandering with me tonight, through silence, through myth, through the soft chambers of ancient earth. Until we meet again on another gentle path, in another forgotten place, this has been Twilight Tale. May your dreams be kind, your night be peaceful, and your heart remain open to the stories that move quietly beneath the world. Good night, traveler. Sleep well.